Hi everyone, this is our channel, Meet the Real Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
Hello, my name is Andrew and I'm 17 years old. Playing tennis has been my great passion since I was a kid. Focus, stamina, and fast reaction times are key requirements of this game. I began playing tennis in primary school and on my way to the top, I have faced some strong players, some of whom were older than me, but I beat them nevertheless. As I grew up and became more proficient, my ambition grew stronger too. My desired dream was to win the Grand Slam Championship and revel in the applause and cheering. I entered the national championship and reached the final match, which was to be played against a strong player. If he were to win the match, his next step would be the Olympics, so I intended to beat him at any cost. The problem was that he was more skilled than me. Fortunately, I believe that the end justifies the means, so I made a deal with one of his training crew members to put an anesthetic in his water bottle. As they say, money talks and makes all things possible. I'm not evil, I'm just pursuing my dreams by the most direct route possible. In the first half of the match, his powerful smashes allowed him to dominate the game. It was a pretty one-sided match. During the break, however, he drank some of the drugged water and suddenly felt very fatigued. The referee noticed his fatigue and asked him if he wanted to forfeit the game, but he refused. Needless to say, I dominated the second half of the match and won rather easily, to everyone's amazement. I was later nominated for the world title. I won many easy matches in the beginning, but in the semifinals, I was matched with a player who was even stronger than the one I had beaten in the national championship. Once again, I put my devious scheme in motion and bribed one of his crew members with a hefty sum of money. Once again, I was the disadvantaged player in the first half of the match. Then during the break, my opponent drank the drugged water from his bottle. As expected, I dominated the second half of the match. Just as I had taken the lead in the match, the referee stopped the game and directed two security guards to arrest me. Some security cameras had recorded the bribed individual drugging my rival's water bottle. The authorities had confronted my partner in crime, and he had confessed and turned me in. Consequently, I was disqualified from the match. As they say in sports, you win some, you lose some.
A suspicious mind can be a gift or a curse, depending on how a person uses it. Lend me your ears and listen to my story. My name is Sasha, and I am 21 years old. I have a suspicious mind. I see an Indian behind every tree. I suspect anyone and everyone of having ulterior motives and designs. If anyone makes any claim, I will research it to determine its veracity. If anyone looks at me, my mind goes through 10 different scenarios of what scheme that person is plotting to take advantage of me. I trust no one. So as you might imagine, I don't have many friends, and I've never had a boyfriend. I just naturally assume all people are two-faced scalawags. So without further ado, I will tell you that one day I was dumbfounded when I realized that I was falling in love with my neighbor Brandon. He was a weird, introverted guy who looked and behaved just like a vampire. Data gathering, you know. I noticed that I never saw him in the daylight, only at nighttime when he went to work. Like me, he didn't have many friends, and he didn't speak much. Everyone I knew agreed that he was definitely a weirdo. But there was something about him I liked. He was my cup of tea. I explored his Facebook page and concocted silly reasons to need to talk to him. We would meet and chat on numerous occasions, and I discovered that he liked me and was watching me too. He asked me to marry him one day, and I accepted immediately. It was difficult persuading my family that he was an okay guy, but I managed to convince them. I felt that he had a mysterious streak in his character, some dark secret in his life. But I was attracted to that and was okay with it. We prepared for our wedding reception. I did errands in the mornings and he did errands in the evenings. Then the night actually, came when we got married. As we spent more time together, I noticed that Brandon seemed very sensitive to bright lights. If any place were too well lit, he would make up an excuse and ask to leave. I noticed that his face was always pale. I noticed that his room at home had only a small lamp, and he liked his steaks exceedingly rare and bloody. Whenever he happened to see an injury, he would gaze hungrily at the oozing blood, just like I've seen in vampire movies. I truly wondered if he might be an actual vampire. One day I walked into his room, and when he looked up and saw me, his smile was creepy and eerie. I teased him and asked him not to hurt me, and he smiled. He offered to tell me a secret if I promised not to tell anyone. He told me that he had been hiding a dark secret for a long time, and he longed to share it with me. I held my breath. It was coming. He was going to confess to being a vampire. I was crestfallen when he instead told me that he had a rare illness that accounted for his pale face and rendered him sensitive to light. He said he was tired of keeping the secret to himself and felt relieved to have someone to share it with. I hugged him crying and told him that I didn't mind at all. And here I was so sure my husband was a vampire. Am I insane or what?
Love what you do until you can do what you love. This is a famous quote that inspires people to seek out their dream job. I heard that quote at school before I graduated and entered the working world. What's that, you ask? Was I successful in achieving my dream? Well, I came this close. Let me tell you about it. My name is Max and I'm 19 years old. Poverty and I are intimate friends and constant companions. I live in one of the poorest neighborhoods in my city. Most of the local citizens work at the seaport. The rest of us, we make a living by scavenging through and collecting rubbish. But I wasn't just an ordinary rubbish collector. No, sir, I was a specialist in that field, like my dad before me. Dad taught my brothers and me how to do it expertly. This is how it worked. Factories liked to use recycled materials to reduce the cost of buying new materials, so we would go to the city rubbish pile and separate out materials into different piles, such as plastics, glass bottles, milk cartons, tin cans, and so on. Then we would sell those materials to factories for reuse in making their products. This recycling process saved the factories a ton of money, but unfortunately, that didn't translate into a ton of money for us rubbish collectors. I had a dream one day of opening my own factory and just sitting back and watching the money flow in. When I told Dad that, he told me that good fortune only happens for a select few people. After hearing those words, I went to bed and dreamed about my future factory. Little did I suspect that my dream might actually come true someday. One day after working late collecting rubbish, while on the way home, I suddenly heard voices coming from a large rubbish pile in front of my home. It seemed that people were using that pile as a place of business to sell drugs and booze. An argument was brewing between two groups. Each group were wielding sticks and knives as makeshift weapons. One guy in Group A had a gun and shot someone in Group B, so someone in Group B stabbed gun guy in Group A. After that, a full-on fight ensued, with everyone in both groups joining in the fray. Within minutes, I heard approaching police sirens, which caused the fight to break up and both groups to run away, leaving the bleeding gun guy lying on the sidewalk. I tried to help him by staunching his bleeding. As I was doing so, I noticed a lottery ticket beside him with a letter saying that it was the winning ticket for $1 million payout. I froze. I looked around. No one was watching, so I acted, somewhat ignobly. Then I left quickly. If the police were to arrive and find me with the bleeding man, they might think that I had done it. I rushed home and fell into an easy chair, taking a deep breath of relief. While I was telling Dad about what had happened, there was a knock on the door. It was the Group A and B gangs. The spokesperson for the two groups held a knife in my direction and said, "Hand over the lottery ticket or die where you stand." Needless to say, I handed it over post-haste. But then he said, "I'm sorry, you've seen too much. You have to die." I pleaded, "But I didn't see anything, I swear." Suddenly, there was a flash from a camera, and the whole group of thugs began laughing. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. "You've been pranked," Dad said, as he stepped out from the crowd. My brothers were behind him laughing too. While relieved that my imminent death had been postponed, I was deeply saddened that I had lost my $1 million chance to get my dream factory. What rubbish. Hi, I'm Kyle and I'm 24 years old. I've been a weightlifter for over 10 years. This sport runs in my blood. I used to follow the international players and imagine myself in their place. I had a fervent dream of becoming the world weightlifting champion. I've been working towards this goal ever since I was 13 years old. I've trained 5 hours a day for years with the ultimate goal of competing in the Olympic Games. I craved the fame and recognition that would grant me. One of my first early successes was winning a junior championship while representing my city. They called me the Tank due to my impressive strength. All the people around me foresaw a bright future for me. Title after title, contest after contest, my victories inevitably led me to the national championship. The winner of that championship would represent our country in the Olympics. I underwent intensive training to the exclusion of all else. I was so focused. My manager was confident that I could easily win the world championship, and I didn't want to disappoint him. The competition was fierce. I faced numerous fierce competitors, but I defeated them all and reached the final round. The only player left to challenge me was last year's champion, who had never lost a contest. The competition gradually got harder and harder until we reached the point where one of us had to break the world record to beat the other. A crucial tipping point came when I needed to lift a weight that was heavier than I had ever attempted before. There was danger in doing so, and my manager cautioned me to consider if it was worth the risk of serious injury to continue. But I was too driven to heed his warning. I had trained and waited too long for this moment. There's no turning back now. So I bent down and grasped the barbell. I sucked in a deep breath and lifted and heaved with all my might. As soon as I had lifted the weight above my head, I knew immediately that I had overestimated myself. After only a fraction of a second, I felt an excruciating pain in my backbone. A snap. I collapsed under the weight of the barbell and fell flat to the floor with the barbell across my chest, pinning me down. The pain in my back was unbearable. I felt as if I were dying. I was taken to the hospital where a doctor diagnosed that I had broken my back at the 4th and 5th vertebrae and that I would never walk again. I tried to kill myself on several occasions, not wanting to live my remaining life in a wheelchair. All my friends, and even my coach, gradually began avoiding me, not wanting to be associated with a loser and a cripple. My mom was the only person who stood by my side and never gave up on me. She helped me with my rehabilitation. Initially, the simple act of lifting a teaspoon felt like I was trying to lift a mountain. After 6 months of intensive physical therapy, a miracle happened. I was able to stand erect for a few seconds. 3 months later, I was able to walk slowly. I began a light training program to get back to my dream. Everybody was shocked that I was determined and foolhardy enough to try to do it all again, but I intended to achieve my dream even if it killed me, which it might very likely do. 2 years later, the scene cuts to Kyle walking out onto the Olympics weightlifting stage to the cheering of thousands of people.
Our feelings are always hard to control. We are humans after all. Sometimes we do things we can't explain, just because we feel that way. I had a student named Daniel, a sweet and innocent child. I was prepared to do anything for him, but don't judge me just yet. First, let me tell you my story. My name is Jolene. I'm a 21-year-old math teacher at a primary school. I live with my sister and my mother. My house was next to the school where I work. I love teaching, and I like teaching the students in creative ways. They loved me, and I loved them. Daniel was a special student, though. Our story began at the start of the new year. It was the first day of school. I missed all my students over the summer break. I missed them so much that I stood by the door to welcome them back. Before I started my first lesson, Mr. Smith, the student affairs officer, knocked on the class door, with Daniel hiding behind his back. Mr. Smith greeted the class and asked them to greet Daniel, but Daniel was too shy and didn't move. So I went over to him to take him by the hand, but he pulled his hand away, which embarrassed Mr. Smith. I asked him to greet his classmates, so he went and he stood in front of the class and he said, "Hello, I am Daniel." Then he went and he sat at the very back of the class. He didn't talk much with the other kids. He didn't like to interact with anyone. Daniel always looked sad, and I thought to myself, he's only 8. What could possibly have made him that way? I tried to get close to him, but he resisted all my efforts. Sometimes he looked like he was hiding some big secret, and later on, I learned what it was. One night, when I was surfing the social media, I came across a horrible news story about a jealous husband killing his wife and another man right in front of his son. The child had been none other than my new student Daniel. Reading that sad story, I started understanding why Daniel was acting that way. I decided to try brightening his life a little. Every day, I would buy a small present and put it on his desk. At first, it had no effect, but slowly he came to love that. During break time, I would sit beside him, and we would share food together. I would get him involved in class activities. On his birthday, I arranged a surprise party with his class, his grandmother, and myself. He was so happy that day. After the party, he hugged me and he told me that he loved me. I hugged him tightly. He was not just a student to me. I treated him like he was my own son. He told me that he wanted to call me mother, and that made me so happy. After his grandmother died, he came to live with me. We faced a lot of problems together, but I followed his success in life with pride. Daniel is all grown up now. He's graduating from the Faculty of Engineering. I am so proud of what he has made of himself. Hi, my name is Sandra, and I'm 17 years old. People used to call me Evil Eyes, not because I had a strange face, but because of my eyes. I had a genetic mutation, so my eyes were different colors. One was light gray and the other was dark brown. This effect made me look like an evil witch, a point of morbid curiosity. Whenever I would enter a public area, people would follow me with their eyes. Whenever children would see me, they would begin crying in fear. I had very few friends because people mocked whoever hung around with a freak like me. Society's negative reaction to my condition forced me to wear a light gray colored contact lens over my dark brown eyes so that both eyes appeared light gray in color. One day, a poetry reading contest was held in my area. I should have considered this to be an excellent opportunity for me because I used to be a very good poetry reader. But I stopped due to the people making fun of my eyes. So when I learned about the contest, I wasn't as excited as I normally would have been. Nevertheless, my mom encouraged me to take part in the contest. As I considered my mom to be my best friend, I took her advice. The day of the contest arrived. It was being held in the National City Theater with a panel of judges. They were some of the highly regarded poets in the country. A huge audience had bought tickets to attend the event. The competition was fierce because there were many skilled poets in there, and they were very confident. As for myself, I was worried and nervous. I wore sunglasses to hide my mismatched eyes. This was part of my presentation, but no one knew that. I could hear some people whispering behind my back, wondering why the stupid girl was wearing sunglasses inside a building. I heard a good number of silly, stupid, hurtful whispered comments. In due course, my turn came, and I went up on stage and began my reading. The audience mumbled to each other as I read. The judges seemed to be pleased. The poem I was reading was about my genetic peculiarity. At a suitable point, I removed my sunglasses to reveal what my poem was about. My mismatched eye colors. I expected gasps of shock or laughter from the audience, but nothing happened. The audience continued listening quietly and respectfully. After I finished my reading, the audience applauded warmly. Mom was crying tears of joy and pride. I was pleasantly surprised by the audience response. I honestly had expected much worse. Well, I didn't win the contest. I wasn't the best poet by a long shot. But what I gained was much more. Pride and confidence in knowing that I had faced my fear and gained acceptance from everyone there. Now I have a new nickname, Wonder Eyes. Have you ever dreamed of having some shocking surprise completely change your life? Whether the surprise is good or bad, your life will never be the same again. I have a story to tell you about this very thing. My name is Tiffany, and I'm 21 years old. I live with my parents and an occasional mystery guest, whose role in our lives I have yet to ascertain. I would see him from time to time. I assumed that he was some down-on-his-luck guy whom Dad helped once. Dad was wealthy and often donated money to help the poor. This mystery man would try to talk to me whenever he would spend a few days with us. I didn't understand why Dad allowed him to stay at our home sometimes. It was bizarre, and it did creep me out a little. There was one time when he opened the door to my room while I was sleeping. He sat on the bed next to me for a while and then left. I was half awake at the time, but I didn't move. When I told my parents about this, they said they would speak with him, but I'm not sure they ever did. I felt uneasy about the situation, so I decided to investigate this matter myself. I had to figure out who this mystery man was and why he stayed with us periodically. One day, Mom wasn't feeling well, and Dad drove her to the doctor's office to be checked out, leaving me home alone. I sneaked into the office to have a look around, see if I could find something about this strange man. While I was searching, I heard a voice behind me. I thought it was my parents, but it was the mystery man. He was smiling at me. It made me feel awkward. He said hi. I stepped back and said, "If you take one step closer, I'll scream." He said, "Calm down. You're suffering from an illness, and I need you to fight it for me and for your parents." "What are you talking about? I feel fine," I said. He said, "You don't recognize me. I'm your husband." Shocked, I grabbed the phone to call the police, but he stopped me. "Don't do that. I won't hurt you, but I won't leave either." I started screaming loudly. Just at that time, my parents returned and entered the study. I shouted for them to help me. Dad came over and hugged me. Then I felt a needle prick the back of my neck, and I lost consciousness. I woke up in a hospital bed, with my parents and my so-called husband beside me. I asked them what was going on. They told me that I must have been dreaming, that I had just woken up from a week-long coma, induced by a rare type of brain disease that damaged my long-term memory. My husband hugged me and told me that he loved me. If only I knew who he was.